At the time of the Clone Wars came a warrior that had risen to a status that was far beyond his original destiny. This being was Savage Opress. Savage Opress was born on Dathomir, where he was taken in by Sage Ventress to be used as a tool in order to conspire a plot to destroy Count Dooku. This plan ultimately involved him being augmented and being turned into a dark side monster. With this, he came under a servitude of Dooku. In reality, this was all part of Ventress's plans to correspond in an assassination of Count Dooku. This plan, however, was complete and utter failure. And after this, Savage Opress attempted to seek out his ultimate purpose until he found Darth Maul. Maul took Savage as an apprentice and recognized his potential as his brother, and essentially Savage served the rest of the times as Maul's lackey, basically assisting Maul within the building of the Shadow Collective as well as Maul's takeover on Mandalore. Eventually though, Savage would be killed by Darth Sidious during a lightsaber duel. Ultimately, Darth Maul and Savage fought valiantly, however, Sidious overpowered them, resulting in Maul getting captured and Savage dying by Maul, regarding himself nothing more than an unworthy apprentice and someone who will never be like Maul. After the initial death of the Grand Inquisitor by the hands of Kanan Jarrus, the other Inquisitors were called by Darth Vader to hunt down the Jedi as well as the Ghost crew for their responsibility upon causing rebel insurgencies on Lothal. One of these Inquisitors was the Seventh Sister. She was sent in to capture the Jedi Ezra Bridger and kill the Jedis of Kanan Jarrus and Ahsoka Tano. She hoped that this status would gain her the rank of the Grand Inquisitor to replace the previous one who has fallen. She has collaborated many times within the Fifth Brother in hunting down Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger. She also developed a personal rivalry with Ezra Bridger. The fact is that they both usually battled each other out to a stalemate, and ultimately her fate was decided during this engagement on Malachor, where an attempt to hunt down the three Jedi from stealing a Sith holocron, she was ultimately killed by Maul, who was being hunted down by the Eighth Brother. Maul killed her in an attempt to show Ezra the price of what would happen if he hesitated, that she could have killed him or the friends he cared about. Ultimately, her remembrance after this event is unknown. Hello YouTube, this is Orange927 back again for another video. And here today guys, I am presenting my next versus video, and I'm trying to make it a bit shorter since the General Grievous versus Plo Koon was a bit long. Probably make this my first versus video short. I'm presenting Savage Opress versus the Seventh Sister. I also apologize upon if my voice is a bit monotone. It's mostly because I lost my voice due to significant allergies, and yeah. I specifically chose these two characters out of my remark that I find them the most wasted characters within the shows of TCW and Star Wars Rebels, as while both shows I like very much in terms of its content, I do find that both shows, in particular Star Wars Rebels, finds a lot of wasted potential to be had, and more importantly, I feel the show has shortcomings regarding certain characters that are introduced. Ultimately, I feel Savage Opress's biggest problem as a character is the fact that he started with a huge degree of potential as a character you could honestly relate to, in the sense that his motivation for fighting off Ventress was to protect his brother. And ultimately, I felt he was a character that I could have sympathized with, and had they have continued that route, I felt I would have really appreciated the character as an addition. But the fact is that they didn't. They turned him into this monstrosity type being, copying the whole thing of Anakin Skywalker from Revenge of the Sith, where he ends up murdering his very motivation to turn to the dark side as soon as he turns to the dark side. And also the whole ritual thing that I personally disagree with him turning to the dark side out of some ritual. And my personal opinion and point of view of how everything works, the dark side is ultimately something where you can't force someone to fall, but you must consciously and of your own free will choose it. By contrast, my issue with the Seventh Sister is the fact that she shares both a thing of underpoweredness as well as the fact that her character's potential is that I knew from the beginning that her existence was there only to provide the Jedi an opponent to fight. But in doing so, they pretty much turned her from an actual character to just a plot device. Honestly, my issue with the Seventh Sister is that her voice actress, her design, and her overall persona leaves her room with a lot of potential to explore. And one idea I always had in my mind and thinking is, what if the Seventh Sister was someone like Barriss Offee, for example? Someone that I always thought should have been a character that could have been expanded upon after that whole Jedi Temple bombing. However, when I learned that she was nothing more but a one-dimensional plot device, I couldn't help but find it disappointing. But with that out of the way, I present to you the Seventh Sister versus Savage Opress. First, we will compare them as physical combatants. Savage Opress was regarded to be a physical tank and heavily strong. He was a Dathomirian Night Brother, a subspecies upon the Iridonian race, a race that's known for their high dexterity, 2 hearts, and insane endurance. As well as that, Savage's Night Sister augmentation allowed him to be almost twice the height of his normal size, and with it, his strength was upgraded as well. He has been known to be able to lift fully grown people off the ground while choking them out. He has been known to be able to engage in unarmed combat against even Jedi. And most importantly, Savage tank feel allows him to recover from many things, from blaster bolts to even force lightning. Easily one of the biggest attributes upon Savage is the fact that he is basically a living tank, and that's reinforced with a prosthetic arm he has that was a replacement for one that was sliced off under the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. This arm really honestly didn't provide many differences from his organic arm, except the metal increased his endurance on it. The Seventh Sister, by contrast, is someone that's a bit more of the opposite of Savage by skill sets. She's not as physically strong nor able to endure as much as him, but her main strength comes from her agility. With this, she's able to evade strikes with relative ease, and more importantly is able to use it to quickly outmaneuver opponents. This, as well as her speed and her overall dexterity within combat, allows her to get a significant advantage against a lot of her opponents, which ultimately were more grounded and more slow by footwork. In general, the Seventh Sister was known to be able to employ this in order to basically make the opponent fall into a slip-up and then exploit the weakness in order to basically kill them immediately. Ultimately, this contest is one that is fairly easy to decide. While the Seventh Sister's agility is highly comparable, and her overall skill sets with it are very suitable for this engagement, Savage simply has more to him. He's stronger, can endure more, and while Savage, yes, is as a whole slower, I don't feel it's enough of a disadvantage for this scale to change. Savage Opress gets the edge as a physical combatant. Savage Opress was known to be a highly capable lightsaber duelist. His abilities as a lightsaber duelist are highly advanced in the sense that he is able himself to engage Jedi Masters and even engage Darth Sidious for a short period of time. His main advantage came from his brute strength, which honestly allowed him to gain an advantage over most opponents considering they were far weaker than him. He is even able to use the saber staff as a means of compensating for its one weakness, the fact that the elongated hilt makes it very awkward for an individual to use. However, for Savage's case, it was barely larger than a standard lightsaber to him, considering how big his height was, and ultimately he also used his skill sets to, as a whole, give him an advantage with using the weapon. Ultimately, this also allowed him to exploit the weaknesses of opponents by their weaker stamina and endurance, and ultimately, even against the most skillful of opponents, this tactic would succeed in many cases and would result in many victories on his end. Though Savage was not without shortcomings, easily the biggest one being is that when he's forced to engage opponents that can redirect his brute force strikes, with him not being able to overpower them, he ultimately had almost no defensive coverage, meaning if you could handle his offense, such as individuals like Darth Sidious or Darth Maul, then he had not much more to give, and ultimately made victory over him relatively easy. When going against opponents like Palpatine, Maul, or Obi-Wan, these disadvantages is what cost him his defeats. The Seventh Sister, by contrast, is one that is specialized more within the sense of lightsaber combat by her refined agility as well as her Makashi. She has been known to go against opponents such as Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, and Ahsoka Tano, has even briefly engaged people like Darth Maul for a time, though the honest truth is that she really was fighting an uphill battle that she didn't stand a chance against. Ultimately, though, the Seventh Sister is one that is highly deadly as she mixes a form of Makashi with precision as well as high agility, though her one weakness is that she was very weak against those that had a lot of kinetic force. Examples being Ahsoka Tano and Maul, when they have high degrees of force that she's just either not prepared for or incapable of defending against. This ultimately led to her defeat by Ahsoka Tano and the fact that Ezra Bridger could hold her off for so long despite her clearly being more skilled. Ultimately, though, the Seventh Sister is still a formidable Inquisitor, and one who definitely has a lot of advantages to her. When applying the double blade, she is definitely more used to using agility, while the single blade more inclined to use precision. It's just all varies. Ultimately, this is another one that's pretty easy to decide in terms of who gets the overall advantage. While the Seventh Sister as a whole is one who's very skillful and definitely remarkable in a sense of the fact that she has a really refined technique, Savage Opress, simply put, has more to him. And because of that, basically, his brute force as well as his overall combative abilities are more effective. Savage Opress gets the edge as a lightsaber duelist. Now to compare the combative force abilities. Savage Opress was known to be a very powerful force wielder, and one that had a high natural talent as well as a masterful ability of raw power. He is known to be able to choke out multiple people at the same time, as well as have high degree forces of telekinesis. He's also known to be able to apply said power an ability where he can basically do force repulse. As well as this, Savage's only big major weakness as far as the force is concerned is he is highly susceptible to force lightning and has no defense against it other than just powering through. As a whole though, Savage does have some unique traits with him, especially considering he can use Saber Throw, and he's very powerful. The Seventh Sister is known to be very basic with her uses of the Force. She's been known to be able to use certain abilities such as standard force pushes and pulls, mind probe, and as well as this is able to grip decent objects. One of her main weaknesses though is that she has zero telekinetic barrier, which means almost any force wielder can break through and apply the force against her. As well as this, a big problem with the Seventh Sister by her applications of the force is that she's very refined, but she's not overwhelming in power. It's not like any of the force abilities she's gonna use is going to one-shot anyone, or even provide her much of an advantage. So honestly, yeah, it's like she's well skilled and refined in force abilities, but nothing beyond the basics. Honestly, this is another pretty easy one to call. While the Seventh Sister has more refined skill within the Force, and as well as that she's pretty creative with it, at the same time, she's nothing beyond the basics. Savage, on the other hand, yes, is his lack of refinement sort of a disappointment? Yes, but he makes up for it through combat experience, as well as just his overall raw power, which completely outclasses the Seventh Sister. In a broad sense, everything the Seventh Sister does on Savage, he'll blow off. Everything he does to her is a freaking bulldozer. Savage Opress gets the edge as a force wielder. Now to compare their armament and equipment. Savage Opress possessed a double-bladed saber staff, which is known to provide more length, leverage, as well as conductive ability of power. Savage has also managed to compensate for its weakness of the elongated handle, hampering him. Like I said earlier, its suit's barely larger than a standard lightsaber for someone of his stature. He also contains a red kyber crystal as the focusing lens. Either one or two, it hasn't been confirmed, but, you know, it doesn't really matter. Savage as well contains body armor, which is able to protect him from blaster fire, but is completely useless on lightsabers. The Seventh Sister, on the other hand, contains a standard length lightsaber, but it is also a saber staff, with the unique ability of it being able to spin blades when activated on the spinner mode. With this, she's able to apply it in combat and overwhelm her assailant, basically throwing them off balance and then tearing them apart. And the Seventh Sister as a whole is able to use this pretty effectively. She also contains 2 red kyber crystals as the focusing lens. She's also equipped with droids that help her. These droids are simply put great as distractions, as well as, you know, things that throw off the enemy and throw them off balance. So as a whole, pretty well equipped. Now this one is pretty close in a way. Both combatants have pretty suitable skill sets within their weapons, as well as that they each provide their own logistical advantage. However, I do say in the end, I do think the Seventh Sister would get the edge, simply because her weapon is more suitable for the capabilities of combat with the spinning blades, as well as the droids, so with both of those, it provides her more options in combat. the Seventh Sister gets the edge as an equipment. And now the verdict. Both combatants are exceptionally powerful and both are highly skilled and experienced. However, in the end, I do believe that Savage gets the advantages. Honestly, I did not come in this fight with any illusion upon who I would think would win. The fact is this video wasn't just for the sake of a matchup. It was also to prove a point that regarding characters is often they're not as great as they look up to be. However, that being said, they're still viable in their own end. While the Seventh Sister contains many logistic advantages, it doesn't do much good against someone who is just downright more powerful in a combative scenario. Which is why I implied to future versus videos, where just because one has the logistical advantage doesn't mean it's impossible for the opponent to come up on top. The Seventh Sister, in my opinion, is a great evidence. She has better training, more refined technique, and she contains better equipment, but she is downright less powerful than her competition. That being said, though, how do I think this fight would play out? To be honest, I think it would be fairly similar to Anakin's first fight with Asajj Ventress on Yavin 4, to a shorter length of time. Both combatants would start fairly evenly matched, with the Seventh Sister trying to employ tricks as well as taking advantage of her logistic advantage against Savage. However, eventually Savage would adapt and be able to power through much of these advantages. As the fight progresses, Savage would be pressing the Seventh Sister, and she would get desperate. She would try to use any advantage she could get over him, but Savage would simply power through. In the end, once she has nothing more to give, Savage would crash into her, overwhelm her, and basically turn her into a cut-up version of, well, an Inquisitor. I declare Savage Opress the victor.